80% of the people you're selling to will absolutely not buy. If you're a founder, if you're a team leader, if you're a sales rep, end of the year is coming up. Time and time again, I see people ignoring the importance of targeting absolutely the right people. And this comes down to either signal collection, they focus a lot on volume, which effectively ends up them not hitting quota, them not hitting their goals, frustration kicks in, then everything just snowballs from there. That's what we're going to fix today. Effectively, we're going to talk about how to pinpoint those accounts, how to find them, how to go about gathering data. And by the end of this video, you'll know how to pinpoint those accounts, how to ditch the previous process that you had with only volume focus, and you'll improve your conversions a lot more easier. I'll say this again, this is I won't make any promises in terms of how much revenue you're gonna make or how much you will increase conversions, because I don't do that. I don't know your specific situation, but I'm gonna give you the tools to make sure that it actually scales as much as possible. Without further ado, I'll jump into my Prezi in a minute. So now, the mistake. When a lot of people try to pay attention a lot on the focus, try to get tunnel vision and focus on one target as much as possible. The problem with that is if the focus of your effort is targeted to something that's wrong, that won't pan out, it doesn't really matter how much effort you put in if it won't convert. Exact same thing applies here. That's effectively what it means. Not every single target that you have in mind deserves the same effort because they don't have the same probability to, first of all, produce the same revenue, second of all, convert. That's the problem that a lot of people deny to understand, because they think of, okay, I've built this team, I've built these outbound processes, we reach out to them, why not try to make my money's worth? That's the problem. Not everyone deserves equal effort because not everyone has the same probability of a conversion. Second point, there's always red flags for you to understand if someone is a good fit or not. But because you like to feel productive, you tend to kind of ignore those red flags, which is a red flag on its own for yourself, because you don't have the understanding of, okay, this specific account doesn't match my criteria. This account does not they don't qualify. Why am I still focusing on them? You don't have that confidence to say, I'm 90% sure, 99% sure that this account doesn't fit, so I won't focus on them. The third reason this happens is the outreach. A lot of people try to block out their day, try to block out some time to do their outreach, whether that's automated on the emails or the DMs, or it's manual, or it's the phone, or whatever have you. But you know for a fact that 80% of that effort is wasted. There's always this saying of 80-20. 20% of the results, 80% of the results will come from 20% of the input. And the exact same thing happens on the flip side. Because you're having so much effort into those accounts, 80% of them will absolutely not convert. And the challenge there is to try to convert as many as possible from that 20% and double down as much as you possibly can. End of the year is coming up. If you're struggling with the conversions previously, does it really make sense to keep up on the same path that you did previously? No. So, when you treat each and every prospect equally, you're gambling your time. And time is finite. You cannot extend your day, you cannot extend your quarter. You have 3 months in your capacity to make sure you hit a specific goal. If you keep doing what you're doing prior, obviously it's not going to work. So you need to sort this out. Now, the reason why we need to set this up in a way that it converts for you as much as possible is because, like I said, you have limited hours. You cannot spend your entire day prospecting. You have to also focus on the activity itself, plus, depending on your role, for the sales calls, the meetings, team management, whatever have you, you need to have that in place. So you need to make sure that every single effort that you put in actually has a high probability of a conversion. Second one, a lot of people talk about the gut feeling. Especially with experience, you develop this gut feeling where you feel that a specific prospect has a high probability of converting. The problem with that is you ignore data and you focus on, oh, I had a conversation with them, I had a conversation on the phone, they seem really interested, but they're not. I'll give you an example. 2 months ago, I had a cold call with a deep tech company that were doing AI model development for massive oil and gas companies and banking bodies. Essentially, the contracts that they were selling, they were for an annual contract was about 10 million. It was a company based out of Ukraine, I believe. And I had a great chat with the founder over the phone in terms of what the problems are, whatever I was making as an educated assumption based on the data that I was gathering. He was confirming back to me, and we booked a meeting to have an initial conversation. The mistake that I did there, he was the founder, he was the CEO, but the rest of the team of his developers that were building the product, they did not want to specialize in anything. So effectively, they were reaching out to everyone and anyone, regardless of the size of the company that was doing oil and gas, regardless of the size of the company that was doing banking and financial services, and their conversions were low. Their capacity was almost maximized because they had to deliver custom solutions to each individual prospect and each individual deal. So it was creating a massive turnover within the company itself, and they had massive problems. My gut was telling me that that sounds interesting because of the potential, but the data right there, which I failed to gather initially, were showing me that effectively this is not going to convert. But I kept chasing that deal for no reason. Same thing applies to you. You need to trust the data right there. You need to gather data as much as possible to make sure that you make educated decisions when it comes down to your outreach, when it comes down to your focus. And the final bit is volume. A lot of times people fall into this trap, and that's why I don't really pay attention to people saying, "Oh, we booked 100 calls," or "We booked um, we had so many positive replies. We had 100 cold calls done in a day per sales rep." That doesn't really say anything. The main thing I focus on is one, conversions, two, the LTV of that specific conversion, because that's what matters at the end of the day. If you're booking 10 calls a day, right, two of those calls, so 20%, converts to a demo with high probability of closing, and then you close one, and then a customer leaves in 2 months. Why does that matter? I would much rather get 5 appointments a day, right? From those five, four of them proceed to a demo. They're really, really qualified. And then I convert two and they stay for a year because the fit was on point. That's a whole lot better. The LTV is higher. So don't mistake volume from progress. That's a vicious circle, because it's what we said here. You're doubling down on effort is something that obviously doesn't work. The risks what happens with that is it's and to expand on the problem is your pipeline looks full, appears full, but it's weak. If you cannot properly evaluate the targeting in terms of what do you believe the probability of those conversions were, right? That's the problem in terms of you being able to pinpoint if that's a pipeline that will convert or if we're just tossing numbers on the screen. You want to make sure that you have high level, high probability of those conversions to happen. You have really solid opportunities to make sure those conversions are in place, and you can nurture those leads and you can pay attention to them because they match your qualification metrics. The second one, because deep down you know that these targets that you're going after don't really have that high probability of converting, you give a forecast out, but then when the forecast doesn't pan out, then that creates internal problems because your morale sinks, you lose trust with your team, your management, your delivery. It creates again a vicious circle. You keep going down, you're losing performance. If you're a sales rep, the management loses performance back in you. If you're running a team, the team loses trust in you because you're obviously not converting as much as they could potentially be expecting, and they put their trust in you. So the compounding. How do we actually fix this? What's the first point? You have a set time within your week to make sure you have your targeting in place, you make sure you have your outreach in place. What we actually want to do is to pay attention to that misallocation. Which type of profile, which type of account you pay attention to and you try to reach out to consistently, that you have previous history that they didn't obviously convert. The second point is for those accounts that have kind of a middle probability, where is it stalling and why is it stalling? And when it stalls, what happens with the management? At which point do they kick in and they feel a bit tricky against you? Or if you're running your own team, at which point do you feel like you're losing trust in the sales predictability and why that actually happens? So, how do we actually fix that? How do we shift away from this specific problem? The first point is probability classification. What does that actually mean? There's a bunch of data aggregators out there. You can gather intent data. You need to build a framework that evaluates every prospect against the criteria that you put together. That's why so many companies talk about the ICP, the ideal customer profile that we need to work with. Reason being is that you need to have consistent criteria that those prospects, those ideal company profiles need to fulfill for you, to make sure that you put away your biases, whether that's your gut feelings, whether that's your potential experience, and focus on what actually the data is telling you, because you can ask for those things, you collect them back, you can make informed decisions. Now, the second point for this one is, as soon as you have your data in place, you need to think about the likelihood of them converting and rank them. What does that mean practically, and how can you make an educated decision with that? Within your data, within your intent, you need to see if, let's say, for example, you're selling a software solution, right? It's some sales intelligence plugin, and that's what you're selling. If you look at within their tech stack, right, that they're using really dated tools and they haven't really converted, they haven't really introduced anything new, what's the likelihood of them buying your own? Do you have such a groundbreaking solution out there that no one else has, and you can present it in such a way that appears completely brand new for them, and that's what's going to make the shift from them not doing anything previously and then doing it with you? That's the conversion likelihood as an example. You can make educated guesses based on the data that you've gathered, with purely from them converting, as what's the probability of them converting. And then the last one is, what's the potential revenue that this account will yield for you? Does it have a potential for you to upsell, cross sell, go within departments? Does it have, what's the potential of them coming on board for about 2 to 3 months and then canceling? Is this a decision for them that's a significant investment that's probably going to create buyer's remorse later on? Or is it a decision that they want to incorporate because they want to scale, and that's another number on a balance sheet that they want to grow as much as possible? That's the step you have to go through, and that's going to get you to success. You start with the probability classification, you then go to the conversion likelihood ranking, and then you go to the predictable revenue that's going to yield as much as possible. Now, essentially what you can expect to look at for this one is, the first point is the fit, second point is the intent, the engagement, and then the timing. To give you an idea and an example for each and every one of these, the fit is what we talked about prior. So how well do they match your ideal customer profile? For your intent signals is the behavioral indicators for purchase readiness. So seeing what they did prior, seeing if they're hiring new people, how long do they stay there, what's the description if they've incorporated new tools prior, what's their exposure in terms of them launching new products. So that means they want to scale them up as much as possible. The third level is the engagement. Have they previously interacted with something similar with what you're selling? Or have they interacted with your content specifically? Do they consume it? Did they ever visit your landing page? And then the last is the timing factors. Essentially, what that is, it really applies to budgeting and funding. Whenever you have a software company, for example, whenever they receive funding, they tend to focus really on the product for the first 2 to 3 months, and then they pivot into the go-to-market strategy. So if you're selling something that's sales related, that's your trigger point. If you're selling something that's product related, you need to have a bit more updating factors in terms of what did they receive, when did they receive that funding. And that's what you need to monitor for your key accounts. And then, based on their scoring and based on the data that you're gathering for them, separate them so you have a different focus for each individual account. We have a video coming up within this week for you to actually how to do that. Now, what should happen with this one is that you increase your conversion rates. Time savings can be a bit tricky in terms of the initial effort you need to put into, but how much time it saves you afterwards in terms of how efficient you are. And then finally, the focus accuracy, you will just jump through the roof. That's what I expect to happen. Now, as a recap, you need to make sure that you're not masking effort as or effort and volume for potential results. If you keep banging the wrong wall, it's never going to fall down. You need to be confident enough for you to exclude wrong feed accounts, and you need to be extremely sniper with your targeting, especially when it comes down to outbound efforts that are manual. The automated part maybe doesn't matter too much because you don't dedicate as much time, but your efficiency rate will go down. That way you avoid friction within your management, right? And you make sure everything flows a lot better. The team trusts you a lot more. And the way to make this happen is effectively to start with ranking them based on their intent signals and very consistent criteria. Tier them up through that level, split them out, disqualify people that don't match your ideal customer profile, expand a little bit more on the conversion likelihood to make sure that the second split happens in terms of the different tiers you're going to focus on, because for the ones that you have a higher probability of conversion, you focus a lot more on them and build that account as much as possible in terms of what that revenue will actually yield to have an accurate prediction of what's going to happen in the future. That's it for today. If you want a video on what the ICP effectively means, it should be the next one coming up, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.